This is Taylor Elwood with the Magical Experiments podcast, which is a show that goes on both YouTube and the Magical Experiments Substack. So, depending on where you're watching it, welcome. And I have with me my wonderful friend, Bill Duvendack. Bill, introduce yourself and tell us who you are and everything. It's been a little while since I've had you on here.
Yeah, it's been a bit. For those of you that I have not met yet, my name is Bill Duvendack. I'm a professional astrologer, tarot reader, uh, author, psychic. Pick a title. It's probably been given to me at one point or another. Among astrology and psychic work, I also do mediumship work. I teach classes, I lecture internationally, and I guess that's about it in a nutshell.
Yeah, in a nutshell.
In
Wow.
a nutshell.
There's a lot going on there, Bill.
There is, and that's actually been a focus of mine getting older is narrowing it down.
Yeah, whereas I seem to expand, which I think is kind of ironic and hilarious in its
Look
own
at
right.
that, expansion, contraction.
Expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. Yeah. So you came out with a new book. Do you have
Yes.
it with you?
Let me see. I got several projects going on actually. No, I do not. The draft copy is with my parents.
Okay. Well, I want to hear all about this book. It just came out. It's just been published, correct?
Yep. Yep.
So tell us about it. What's the title and where can we find it and what's it all about?
So the title of it is Ubiquitous Consciousness. So immediately you have to know what the word ubiquitous means, and it's not a commonly used word, so I understand why people don't know. It basically means all pervasive.
Mm.
And the reason I went with that word is because all the titles I wanted to use were taken either by college courses or institutes or other books or classes out there because the concept of the book is all about the holy guardian angel, the higher self, and the ascended self. But to talk about those ideas, we also have to look at where we've come from as a species. There's always been an innate desire to strive for something more or strive for something higher. And that pursuit on an individual level is the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. So I break down the terms later in the book, but I lay a bedrock of it's completely natural to seek this kind of communication.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
a different kind of book.
well, that's good. I like different kinds of books. I'm looking forward to getting my own copy at some point here. No, I thought it was an interesting title, Ubiquitous. It's like, huh, that's an unusual title. Well, it's sure to stand out a little bit. Well, let's talk about the Holy Guardian Angel because I think a lot of people, when they think of it, they probably associate it with Abramelin the magician. But let's talk about your experiences with the HGA and what prompted you to write this book.
So a few different things prompted me to write the book. It's a standalone book, but it builds on what was laid down before with vocal magic, spirit relations, psychic protection, and spirit associates. And the reason that I break it down is because essentially what I'm doing over a multi-year period is I'm writing a book to correspond to the Sephirah on the Tree of Life. And
Hmm.
I started with Malkuth being vocal magic.
Hmm.
In the beginning was the word.
That's right.
So now I'm up to Tifereth, the seat of the higher self corresponding to the sun. And I decided to share part of my journey with the connection with the higher self and the holy guardian angel. Because if you get two magicians in a room, you're going to get four different opinions on whether it's a subjective being, an objective being, an internal being, a praetor human intelligence. You're just going to get all kinds of theories out there. And my experience, like Crowley's and probably yours too, is has changed over the decades. When I was younger, I saw the holy guardian angel as like a higher self, and the two were interchangeable. But then after I made connection with it about 20 years ago or so, it left me wanting to be clear on that before I could talk to people about it. I had to have it straight in my own mind. And eventually, I kind of came full circle to the holy guardian angel being an external being, but it could also be argued that it exists subjectively and objectively. That's
Hmm.
an idea that Michael Kelly rolled forth in his book Apophis many years ago, I think. So this book really doesn't tell my story of making the conversation, but rather it gives you the tools and the knowledge you need to decide for yourself how you feel about this idea. How do you feel about this concept or this thought? Is it an external being? Is it part of us? And the correct answer, of course, is it's completely subjective.
Hmm.
Each person has an intimate relationship with it. So the book does not go heavy on dogma, saying, oh, it's this or it's that. I just present the cases so that the reader can decide for themselves and they have information to decide when they're ready to go there. And the whole thing that got me started is many, many years ago when I was going through the Golden Dawn material in the 90s and discovering some outlying magic at the time because most of this was pre-internet. I discovered that it was highly suggested before you continue forth with the work, you make that knowledge and conversation of your holy guardian angel to assist you. So that should be the bedrock of your foundation.
Hmm.
So in the book, there's 5 or 6 different methods about how to achieve the connection, different approaches and things like that.
One per opinion.
Just about, yeah.
I couldn't resist that because I was just thinking like what you said earlier, and I'm like, yeah, you get two magicians in the room, and you really do get multiple points of opinion and perspective, at least four, if not more.
Right, exactly. If you're lucky, it's only 4.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because the concept of the HGA, I've kind of thought about that a bit myself, and I would say that what's interesting for me is that like what does it really mean to connect, I think in a very real sense, to one's inner knowing, to that divine consciousness within, and how do we allow that to permeate our being, to be ubiquitous? That's the question. And of course, it also, how do we differentiate it from spirit contact, from working with spirits? Oh, I have this spirit I've connected with, and is that the HGA or not, or what does that mean? And I'll share my own personal experience with this, is that I feel like my HGA really comes through in terms of my creativity. Like that's
Hmm.
the imagination and the creativity, the work that I do. Like I definitely feel that I've been put here for a very specific reason, or I chose to come here, or whatever whatever it is we want to believe or not believe about that whole deal. Um, I definitely found that that my life has been shaped by the creative and imaginative curiosity that drives me to write all the books and do all the things that I do.
Exactly. And I have found that since I made the initial contact and conversation many years ago, that it has bled over into what I'm doing now. And I absolutely love that because it validates the authenticity of the connection.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and that in and of itself is a really important thing. I think sometimes people doubt themselves and as a result doubt that contact because they're like, well, if they even encounter the concept. I mean, not everyone who practices magic, for example, gets into the HBA automatically. It's kind of a or explores it. I'll admit that I've always treated it as from a perspective of just being kind of like, well, each person kind of you do you as far as that whole thing goes. Because I've had some people who get into that, and I'm like, well, that's nice, and how does that really play out in your life? That's what I want to know.
Exactly. And that's a major part of understanding the, we'll say, psychological connection with the HGA is you could make verified contact with a being, but like I always talk about, and you share similar views, if that isn't improving your life or it's not giving you results, then it's mental masturbation. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody's getting off somehow. But when you go to the effort to make contact with a spirit or some kind of consciousness like this, if you're not working with it in your daily life, then what are you doing?
Yeah, well, and that's really kind of the reality of it, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of the way that I approach magic in general. It's like if you're not living your if you're not living your magic, then what are you doing? If you're just okay, I'm occasionally doing magic to get something. All right, well that's fine. I mean, go you. And the interesting thing too is that I don't know if you agree with this or not, so feel free to disagree. You very well may. But I found that the more I live my life magically, the less I need to actually do magic. It just kind of naturally segs into everything that I do, and things unfold. And not that I don't occasionally, not that I don't still do magical work. I do, but I've actually become more and more picky about it in some ways, and it's like very, very intentional. And it's like, yeah, I'm gonna put a little push here because I want to go in a specific direction, and then I'm just gonna let it roll out and organically unfold.
Exactly. And I kind of had a similar view where the more that you do this, the more you just become it. And when you become it, it really shifts your consciousness in ways that it's hard to explain to other people. Because that's when you start to get the very strange paranormal occurrences that you have in daily life, or things, or you have experiences happen that other people would say, that's crazy. And you're like, well, that's just an average Tuesday. That that just this stuff happens all the time, and then they ask you to explain it, and you're like, I got nothing. It happens, and it's a result of this, but how it happens, who knows?
Well, and I mean that brings up another thing. Like, I mean, I did a ritual back at the beginning of September. I had just left my job and I was going to go to graduate school, and I decided not to go to graduate school as a result of the ritual. I did a
Mm,
working with Eros and Aphrodite. I went to the ocean and I did this ritual. I was doing it. It was to the new moon, but it was during the daytime because it was like, hey, why not? The moon's still up there in the sky. Like I don't.
right.
I don't have to do it at night.
Nope.
Um, for any of you purists out there, guess what? Here in Team Magical Experiments, we don't do things by the book. We make it up along the way. Anyway, I go and I do this ritual, and I'm calling in the sun as well, and everything else, and I call in Eros and Aphrodite, and they're like, well, what do you really want? I'm like, well, and I have two arrows with me, and I plop one arrow into the ground, and I'm like into the sand, and I'm like, I want to work with the magical community and continue making my offerings and classes and writing my books. And then I'm like, and I put the other arrow in, and I want to serve the men's community. I want to do men's work and help men become safer, healthier men out there for the world because we really need it. And boy, do we really need it even more so now. And so I was just like, that's what I want to do. And they're kind of like, okay, well, if that's what you want, be prepared for your life to change. And like a few days later, I'm like, yeah, I'm like feeling all this resistance toward graduate school, and I haven't been completely 100% in integrity with myself. I'm not going to graduate school. I'm just going to focus on going back and becoming fully self-employed because I don't want to take on all that debt or any of the other things. And boom, there I did, and things just started to unfold. I didn't do a lot of other magical work up until the last new moon recently, which was Samhain, literally on Samhain, basically, or around then. And then I did a working to Saturn because I thought that was totally appropriate for Samhain and the new moon. And now that's unfolding in my life for this month and has already had some interesting effects. And it's like every single time I do magical work, it's like I used to be the person who would do it all the time, but now, and I do my daily stuff, don't get me wrong, but now I'm like, Do major magical working, and I'm going to let it unfold, and I'm going to trust that it's going to produce what it needs to produce, and that I just need to be there and show up and do what I need to do on my part to make it happen.
I had a very dear friend of mine basically say that and tell me that many, many years ago, which is the older you get, the less magical ritual you do. And you just illustrated the reasons why. You get more selective about it. You look at it from a different way. You kind of take a different view to ritual construction. You know, you're beyond the realm of taking something that's written in a book and performing it as it's written. Now you're into the truly experimental phase. What works for you? What doesn't work for you? Any problems with the ritual construction are going to expose holes in your own magical and spiritual philosophies. So get ready for that. And you have to trust, if nothing else, you trust yourself that the ritual's going to do what the ritual's going to do. And it's everything's going to be fine. So I totally get where you're coming from. I'm the same way. The older I've gotten, the less rituals I do. I do the standard ones on a daily practice, but as far as anything more formal than that, I don't really do that too much anymore. I did a ritual, I think maybe it was Equinox, and that was the last one, so it's been a while. And the rituals take different forms.
Hmm.
It's not always standing in a circle at an altar chanting words in a foreign language. Sometimes the ritual is not even happening in your temple at all.
No, no burning incense, sacrificial knife, or anything like that, right?
Right. Yeah. No, no, not now. Not now.
No, no, yeah, I kind of outgrew that.
Yep. Some things lose their luster over time.
That's right. That's right, brother. Well, it's interesting because too, like I think that like when you're really connected to the magic, and you're connected to your HGA or whatever you want to call it, that you also find that a lot of the magic of life comes through. Because the equinox, I was actually at this event that was run by a men's organization called Sacred Sons called Convergence, and it was this huge, like 400 people were there, 200 men, 200 women, and we were all doing our work. It wasn't, people weren't there to hook up or anything. Like we were people doing our inner work and changing our lives. And that was magic right there. Like I didn't need to go and do anything magical then. And if I had done something magical then, I would have actually taken away from the event and my experience because I would have basically distracted myself from what I needed to be there for.
Right. And that's what I've noticed a lot too. Um, the best example or the best platform to see this in is professional sports.
Hmm.
Regardless of your thoughts on them, you get several people together with a common goal and they have similar skills and they work together with a mindset and teamwork kind of ideas, and that produces a result. That's their ritual. And we see this all over the place in society. We see that when groups of people come together and they have a common focus, it might not be a by the book, pun intended to the grimoire tradition kind of ritual, but it's still ritualistic nonetheless, and it can produce just as big, if not bigger, results than a ritual you do in your temple.
Yeah. And that's right there. That's a whole part of it. I mean, that's so essential. And that'd be the advice I'd give to anyone who's just starting out practicing magic is like, yeah, it's great. You're learning all the things, you see all the shiny bling, all that other stuff, and take a step back. Look at look at take that same lens and apply it to the rest of your life, and you'll start to see that you have a magical life that shows up in many different ways. Now, of course, I don't expect someone who's just starting out to really take that advice because honestly, I wouldn't have taken that advice.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would have called us old fogies and just moved on to someone my age that was doing magic.
That's right, and so I get it. But when you come back many years down the line, whoever that person is, and you listen to it again, just remember what I told you.
Exactly. Make sure you record this.
For posterity. That's right. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, that's awesome, man. So, and so this is part of a series. So walk us through the other books. I knew about Vocal Magic, but tell me about the other ones that are in this series overall for the whole and like and whatever you can tell me about the ones that are coming down the pike.
Yeah, yeah. So the first one I started off, I just started at the bottom of the tree and worked up, but I didn't want to promote the series as a Tree of Life series because my goal was to write these in a very open, basic kind of way so that people would get turned on to them even if they don't have any Kabbalistic or even magical backgrounds, nor a desire to learn that. One of the biggest problems in metaphysics is that people get excited about something and they want to carry the readers along with their excitement. My model was more, I want to take these esoteric concepts and distill them down so people see how they're at work in daily life. So Malkuth, of course, at the bottom of the tree of life is the physical world, hence vocal magic. In the beginning was the word, when the word is all power. Then you go up to Yesod, of course, corresponding to the moon, and I wrote Spirit Relations, which is a beginner book on learning what psychic skills you've got. It gives you a basic understanding of the astral plane. It talks about phenomenon and creatures you might meet there. It's full of exercises to determine what you're good at and what you're not. From there, I went to Hode, of course, correspondent to Mercury, and I released Psychic Protection because really, at its essence, psychic protection is just your ability to manipulate your mind for protection.
Hmm.
And then you can use tools to enhance that. Then the book after that was Netsock, so it corresponded to Venus, and that was Spirit Associates, which was a look at your spirit guides from a spiritualist context because I was an ordained spiritualist minister for 9 years. So then this one, of course, corresponds to Tiferet, the sun. It's all about the higher self, the HGA. The next one is going to be Gebra, so it's going to correspond to Mars. And this one I expect to get some flack for because I'm going to be writing about karma and universal laws.
Mm.
And there's enough people out there who say, well, I don't believe in karma. And it's like, that's okay. Karma believes in you. But I also know there's so much fake and wrong information out there that I'm taking it upon myself to clean up as much of it as I can and then forward the conversation to include universal laws.
Hmm.
So then that, of course, is Sephiroth 5. 4 after that will be Hesed slash Jupiter, and that will be a book about ascended masters. And then with the Supernal Triad, I'm not sure how I'm going to go yet. Either Binah is going to be about the idea of feminine divinity or the goddess in general, and then Hakma is going to be about the god, or I'm going to do something different there. I haven't decided how I'm going to do those top three. And right now, I'm even contemplating not even doing a book for Kether because it's the first swirlings. Maybe put out like a blank journal. Maybe do something along those lines because really I could write about consciousness, but there have been people that have written about consciousness so extensively over the years that it would just be my view on consciousness. And by the time you get to that point in the whole series, you already have an understanding.
Yeah, that's where you release it with with like one line in the entire book, and it's as enigmatic as possible.
Right. Yeah, I should just have one phrase in there in English, monosyllabic, just because of the times we live in.
If you contemplate it long enough, you might just get it.
I love it. But yeah, that's the rest of it. I was doing a book every 2 years, but that means the whole project from beginning to end would take 20 years. So I'm thinking about releasing a book a year to kind of speed it up. Because if I'm already at Tiferet, then I've only got two for sure, and then I got to figure out the Supernal Triad on top. And it's all basic concepts. My dad, who's not into any of this, has read them so far, and he gave me one of the better compliments the other day when he said, "I don't know anything about this, but you use enough similes in the text that I can follow along and it all makes sense."
Well, that's huge. I mean, it's important. You want to make your book accessible, so when you can go to somebody who would not otherwise read it and they can get it, then that's like huge. I can't say that with my books. Most people who read my books are not going to get, you're going to have some kind of background there, but that's okay. That's the audience I write for. But the point is like regardless of what you write for, if you can get it to the person who can be like, I can get something out of this, then you're doing it right.
Exactly. I was inspired by the British astrologer Alan Leo at the turn of the 20th century. He did an entire series of books about astrology, and he called it the Astrology for All series. His goal was to break astrology down so that the common person could understand it, learn it, and use it. And he had nothing more than an eighth grade education. So I kind of use that as the idea. If I do something that even comes close to that, then I'll consider it a victory because these are not esoteric concepts, but the writing about them is esoteric. So you kind of need to distill things down and show that it's not just losing yourself with existential crises or just losing yourself in thought. There are practical applications that you can use for this material.
Mhm. One thing that occurred to me as you were talking about the series is I'm like, huh, okay, I definitely see the Kabbalistic. And then I thought, but then there's also the astrological slash planetary aspects to this. So you can actually read these books on multiple levels and then start to
Exactly.
explore and unpack those correspondences. And of course, you can also look at it from like Earth, fire, air, water, etc., where those specific correspondences show up and things along those lines. I mean, it's really that's the beautiful thing about the Kabbalah. You have a lot of different correspondences that can be mapped out, and then it's up to you as to how you explore them. But just thinking about it from an astrological current and some of the work that I've done with astrological currents in my magical work over the last few years, it's been really interesting to play with those and see those come out and utilize them more in a very knowing manner. So that's just like now I'm looking at your books from a different level right there, Mr. Duvendack.
And that is my goal. The stuff that you were talking about writing, where you got to kind of got to have a background before you get into my stuff, that's my idea too with different books, but this one is really written so that if you've never heard the word Kabbalah, if you have no idea what it's about and you don't want to learn, you can still get something out of this book. You just don't know that it's a Kabbalistic teaching.
Dun dun dun.
It's all about the
Gotcha.
ambush.
I
Yep,
gotcha.
suckered you.
Yeah. Well, and there's nothing saying you couldn't release more than one book in a year. I mean, you know me, I obviously write more than one book in a given year. I mean, this year's been like the first year that I've only written two books in a year. Like I'm not gonna have another book out in time, but I'm like, okay, I'm working on making up for that.
Well, that's actually kind of where I'm at. Last year, 2023, last year one book came out. 2022, one book came out. 2021, one book came out. And it's been driving me crazy that there's only been one book coming out a goddamn year. So this year there's actually going to be two. There's Ubiquitous Consciousness, and then coming up in a couple of weeks is a book called The Axle of the Wheel.
Oh, all right, you gotta tell us about this one now.
So it's a book about the eight-spoked pagan wheel of the year.
Okay.
But I don't approach it from here's what the festivals are, here's the correspondences, here's ritual to do for that. All that stuff's been done to death. So what I do is I focus on the astrology and the metaphysics of it.
Hmm.
And the way that I do it is I've collected all my articles from when I was writing a column for the Dolman Chronicles, which was an online magazine that ran for many years, and I usually contributed to the issues. We took all those articles, put them together, and then came up with this book because the issues of that magazine were released around the times of those festivals. So then what I did to find the common thread among all of those articles was to see how what I was writing about matched what you can expect is happening energetically at any one of those festivals. So you don't have, like, for example, here in the Northern Hemisphere, we've got basically autumn equinox in September. We have Samhain right after it. That's always going to mean that there's eclipses coming up. There's eclipses happen in pairs, two in the autumn, two in the spring.
Hmm.
So therefore, when you're getting ready for your festivals, keep in mind eclipse energy is going to distort stuff.
Well, that sounds like a really handy guide as well. So that's really cool. So
Yeah,
we'll have
trippy.
to make sure we include that in the show notes here so that people can pick that book up as well. See, there you go. You're putting out more than one book.
Oh, I know. And if I had my druthers, I'd put out a third because I got two more ready to go and two that are in the middle of being written.
Well, if you got well, hey, just gonna push you here. If you got two more ready to go, get those suckers out already, man.
That's actually going to be my December project is getting one of them ready to go. Yep.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel you on that. It feels good for me. I'm kind of like, oh, I got my men's book out, my first one, and I got my final fiction book out for my one series, and it's like now I'm working on the Walking with Demonic Spirits, and I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna get this out in this year because I'm busy working on other projects. But I'm getting to the point where down the line here, I'll be able to do this a little more consistently. So that's important. But I think, it's important. We writers, we have to write. We have to put out stuff. We have to create. It's just as simple as that. I'm really excited about that book. I'll definitely pick up a copy of it because that would be relevant to some of the stuff that I'm doing and could be a really useful resource guide.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the whole idea is just to be as close to perfect as you can be or be better than you were yesterday.
Hmm.
So it's stuff that we learned as children, but when we start dealing with these forces, sometimes we forget the wisdom of things we learned when we were younger because we learned it in a different area of life.
Hmm.
The ability to compartmentalize and categorize thoughts is one of the strengths of the human brain, but sometimes it can work against you.
That's true. Well, and I mean, I think, the point you made, for example, about eclipse energy is spot on. And there's a lot of times where I'm like, okay, this is something that I've seen play out. In fact, there are times where I'm kind of like, okay, it's eclipse energy. I better be either very specific about what I'm going to do, or I better just let it go and I don't need to do anything.
And that's usually my approach is I just sit back and just watch it. I don't have to do anything. I just look to see where it's hitting my chart so I know what area my life's going to get hit, and then I just sit back and pop some popcorn and keep doing what I'm doing because I know everything's going to play itself out.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And I mean, if you are going to do something, do it with an angle of at least taking advantage of it. If you know it's going to hit a specific area, okay. What do I need to do to work on that area? What shadow work, for example, do I need to do or whatever else? Like, that's perfectly valid, but there you go.
Well, and what you just said is a great adjunct to one of the books that I'm working on now. I'm in the middle of writing. I'm going to write a book on how to time a ritual.
Hmm.
And so there's method number one, look at what's going on in the sky and do it that way. But then method number two is get more specific with your astrology and see how it interacts with your chart because you can narrow down the focus of your ritual. If you know a certain life area is about to fire off, then you can do a ritual to magnify it or direct it.
There you go. I like that. Yeah. I mean, I would totally do that, and that sounds like it would be really relevant. I mean, I think timing magic is always really interesting. Like, when do you want to time something? One of the questions, I just finished my advanced space-time magic class, and one of the questions that I gave to people to really consider is like, when do you want a result to occur? Not just about, getting it to happen as quickly as possible, but like take a moment to really slow down and consider like when would be the best time for this result to appear in my life, and how can I capitalize on the natural currents that are already there to help bring that along and use that in order to create the change I want in my life.
Yeah, and I think that's what gets a lot of people into trouble is they don't take that line of thought into account when they're planning everything.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a very real factor too that the human experience is like, well, I've got a problem right now. I need to solve it. Yeah, okay. Do that. Yeah, I mean it's interesting because I mean when I look at the first 10 years in particularly in particular my magical practice, it was like, yep, I did magic to solve problems. And then I hit on a realization of like, I'm doing this magic to solve problems, but a lot of times it's creating more problems, and then I'm doing more magic, and it's not really getting me what I want. Okay, there's something I need to change here. What's going on with that?
That's where I'm going later in life is okay, I see this problem, I can do a ritual to fix it, or I can figure out what the hell the root of the problem is, and we can go straight to the root, and that may or may not require a ritual.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of time, and that's the thing too. Like a lot of times it doesn't, and then it's like, okay, you've done your work there, and everything else is solved, and then you can just enjoy your life and move on. And then when you really need to do that ritual, that's when you save it for the things that where you don't have a ready explanation, or you're just like, I want to enchant for something down the line because I actually want to design my life. I'm all about life design at this point with magic.
Damn right, that's the best way to use it.
It only took me 30 years to figure that one out.
Hey, at least it didn't take 40, man.
Yeah, no, right? Yeah, I'll take that win where I can find it. But yeah, it's no, it's just it's a funny thing because a lot of times I'll see people will very much go into that problem solving mode, and it's like, okay, that's only going to get you so far. And I think it's a sign of maturation in magical work when we start to look at like, well, when can I time this? When do I want this to show up? How do I want to design my life? How do I really want to apply magic in a very strategic and meaningful way to get what I want?
And you hit the nail on the head with that word strategic. Too many people use magic as a first attempt rather than a last resort. And either way, it's an extreme. But if you stop and think, where would this best fit strategically? Then you've elevated your spirit more than you realize.
Hmm. Yeah. And you've also, I mean, that right there seems to me to fit the embodiment of the HGA.
Exactly. So, a little background piece about ubiquitous consciousness that I haven't shared with a lot of people. This is the first book that I've done completely myself. Cover, editing, uploading to KDP. That's where you're going to be able to find it in all their outlets. The artwork, the uploads, the trial, the troubleshooting. I had never done that before because most of my books either went through a publisher or I had someone else doing that side of it. All I had to do was write it and edit it. So the fact that I had to go through that learning curve while writing a book about the HGA cracks me up still to this day because I can see that it was the next initiation. It was the next part of the initiatic process, becoming closer to the HGA, where I had to do it all myself. And the universe, in its infinite wisdom, is so kind that not only did I get to do that book like it, I also did a book for the Astrological Association of St. Louis. It's a 50th anniversary commemorative book. I had them at the same time, from 0 to 60 in about 6 weeks. Amazing.
You learned something for sure. Although I might have some additional learning for you because I've been doing this longer.
Oh, I
I
know you do because I'm going to pick your brain about some other things related to that later.
Yeah, so well there you go. So see, folks, you get a little inside knowledge here about what happens behind the scenes when it comes to being an occult author here.
Yeah, it's not all rainbows and unicorns, folks.
Definitely not. Yeah, no, but that's cool, man. I'm proud of you. I was thrilled. I did see you mention that actually. I was like, oh, he's self-publishing. Cool. I was like, yeah, go you, Bill, go you.
I absolutely love it. The Ubiquitous came out November 13th, and even though I had two books at one time, so a crash course on learning and all of the speaking the computer website language and all that, I feel like the chains have been released. So I plan on upping my game on releasing books because now there's not another person involved.
Well, I mean, you're actually cutting out the middle person in the process. So, I mean,
Ex-
I still pay for I still get my covers designed by someone, but that's just, that's me. But
And that's probably what I'm going to do.
but the point is you get to kind of you get to have a level of control and experience and all that, and that's amazing. I mean, it's absolutely a wonderful experience. I highly recommend that to any of those of you who are listening out there, unless you happen to be like a really famous Llewellyn author or something like that. There are a few of them out there, I understand.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
I'm not one of
Nah,
them.
nah, me either. I mean, I got friends that are, but that's about it. Yeah, and that's been my magic for the year,
hmm
has been stepping up because I already knew I had to step up to this level. It was only a matter of time. So then at the beginning of this year, I just got annoyed and was like, well, God damn it, now's going to be the time.
No, I hear you. I mean, it's kind of the same thing for me. Like I'm like, okay, I got to step up, and so now I've stepped up and stepped back into being fully self-employed, and it's like, all right, I got to put myself out there, and I got to hustle and get the stuff coming in because that's the name of the game now. And if I want to stay this way, which I do, thank you very much. I better step up. I gotta put myself out there. It's interesting though, like like people don't realize like how much work is involved with that sometimes. Oh, so and so seems to have a really easy life. Not necessarily. We're working our
Right.
tails off, people.
Right. There's all kinds of stuff you don't know about, and most of it would be shocking. And I don't mean in the magical woo-woo shocking. I mean oh, you got to do that. You've got to learn this. You've got to negotiate that. That is scary. No, no, that's just an average day.
Yep. Yep, exactly it. So it's a funny kind of experience but it's so worthwhile. And this is part of living a magical life, like designing the life that you want to live, but then stepping up and dealing with the challenges. And it's not always about using magic to solve it because you can't. It's not always going to be the case. And that's where that strategic application becomes so important. You want to be able to call in exactly what you need and when you need it instead of just, you know,
Relying on it. Right.
relying on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been a fantastic journey. It's been a lot of work, a lot of headaches, a huge learning curve on my part, and I wouldn't trade it for the world because you got to pay a price for everything. That's just the way that physical reality works. So I would rather pay this price than having to work overtime and not getting an increase in my check. I'd rather have the freedom to do this at home rather than dress up in a zoot suit.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's a yeah, it's a much better way to live. But I mean, not everyone wants to do that, and or is called to it, and that's fair enough too.
Yep.
What's important is if we're talking about design, a life by design, is that you design the life that you want to live. I mean, I've known many people who are very fulfilled by the work that they do, and going in each day and then being able to come home and not do some of the stuff that like you and I have to do, for example, and all the more power to them, as long as it fulfills them, and that's the magical life they want to build. That's perfectly valid.
Exactly. And in some cases, that's more spiritual than people that do things like we do.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can think of somebody like, for example, who goes and finds genuine fulfillment from working in a hospital or something like that. That is a very spiritual life in its own way. And who are we to say otherwise? Just because you have all the trappings doesn't necessarily mean.
Right?
Yeah. No, so that's awesome. I am so happy for you, my brother. It is good to see that you're taking that, you're stepping up in that way, and that things are unfolding for you in the direction that you want.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, I feel a corner turning, not just for me personally, but also life in general. And it could just be hitting this age in my life. It could be the external noise created by politics and all of that scene. It could be just an intuition. But regardless, if the only constant is change, then really the only choice you have is to adapt.
That's true. I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing, recent events occurring the way that they did. I kind of was just like, all right, well, how do I adapt to this? This is what it is what it is. I can't change it as far as that goes. So, how do I adapt to it? And I think that that's an applicable thing. I mean, I always say adjust and adapt, adjust your attitude and your perspective, and then adapt to the circumstances and turn them into your favor as best you can.
Exactly. It comes back to the IAO formula. In the military, they know it as improvise, adapt, and overcome. Of course, in magical circles, it has a different meaning, but the idea is the same. You recognize it, you see what needs changed, and then you go out and change it. You have to put those emotions of what you want aside when you're faced with the stark reality in front of you.
Yeah. So, where can people find you? And what else would you like to share with us?
I've got two websites right now that you can find me at. One is BillDuvendack.com. We're still putting some finishing touches on that. So it's out there, but it's not quite ready per se. And then www.418ascendant.com is where my digital classes are, my blog, things like that. Of course, I'm all over social media like glitter at a stripper party. So it really doesn't matter what platform I'm there. And I just added TikTok recently.
Oh,
So
cool. I haven't added TikTok yet. I don't know if I will or not, but I mean, I know it's there and it's kind of a reality, but I'm also like, I've only got so much time. I'm doing a lot with YouTube Shorts lately, actually.
that's the direction I want to go is more manipulation of YouTube rather than TikTok. I went there begrudgingly because I had people sending me videos that you had to have an account to have, and then people said, "Hey, you might want to look into this because they really like you on TikTok." But I'm doing good to handle YouTube. It's all like you said, it's all energy disbursement. So I keep that TikTok to a minimum, but YouTube is more where the focus is going to go.
Yeah, and this is a good example actually from a very practical level of that disbursement of energy. Like, I mean, people who are seeing this might not think that there's anything magical here going on, but yeah, it is. There is a lot of stuff to really consider if you look at it from a metaphysical level. How much energy do I want to give away to different things in order to get what I'm trying to get versus being able to provide clarity and focus on what I'm trying to do and actually reach the right people, regardless of what
Exactly.
platform. Yeah.
Exactly. And the funny thing that I'm sure you've learned, as I and others have, is that the deeper you go with what we're talking about, the more your personality, the more your skill set, the more your disposition lines up with professionals in other areas of life.
Hmm.
Not everybody who sets out to be an occultist is going to end up like Alan Moore. they're going to be whatever they are meant to be, whether it's a three-piece suit wearing person, whether it is the crazy old hermit that lives in the middle of nowhere. That's all subjective to the person. But I have found skills and experience and lingo kind of crosses all platforms and industries in society. And I, for one, like that because you can talk to a business person on their level without having to interject or having to feel like you're going to interject a magical concept every third word.
Yeah, I get that, and I appreciate that too. There's such a wide variety of people out there, and it's how we become better magicians, anyways, exposing ourselves to different perspectives and ideas and things along those lines. Well, it has been wonderful having you on here. Any final word of wisdom for us?
You know, it's
Keith or Lake, if you will.
keep it simple. You know, keep it simple. Use common sense. Bring pragmatism into your magic.
There you go. There's your one line. Keep it simple. For your Keith
Keep
or
it
Buck.
simple, silly.
Well, it's wonderful having you on here, and I'm gonna definitely keep an eye out for more of your books. So for those of you who are watching this, you should see in the show notes below links to Bill's website as well as to the newest books that he's had come out. And if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on my Men's Miss or Magical Experiment Substack, please make sure you like this and restack it. Share it out there with your followers so that other people can appreciate the wisdom and wit of Bill Duvendack and myself.
Thank you for the opportunity to be on here. It's always nice chatting with you, brother. It's been too long.
Way too long. All right, take care.